Okay, so we all have our favorite ways to learn new things, right? Reading, highlighting, like sometimes even taking tons of notes. But have you ever thought about this? What if one of the most powerful tools we have has been there all along, something we might have just thought was for kids? I'm talking about drawing.
Exactly. And welcome to The Deep Dive, where today we're going deep on learner-generated drawing as a learning strategy. You sent over this super in-depth research article, The Promise and Practice of Learner-Generated Drawing by Van Meter and Garner.
Yeah, this article really caught my eye. The idea of drawing to learn just seems so obvious, right? You make a visual for the information, but when you look at the research, whether it really works or not, well, the results are kind of all over the place. Actually, the authors even call it disappointing at times.
What's fascinating for us today is to figure out why. When and why can drawing be so helpful for you, the listener? And maybe we can figure out why those past studies haven't always been so clear. You've mentioned wanting those aha moments without getting overloaded with information. So that's exactly what we're aiming for today.
All right, so first things first. What exactly are we talking about when we say learner-generated drawing? It's not just doodling while you're listening to a lecture, right?
Definitely not. Van Meter and Garner are very specific about this. Learner-generated drawing, the way they define it, is strategic. It's on purpose. You're drawing with the goal of understanding and remembering something. It's a way to structure what you're learning, sort of like when you summarize the main points or ask yourself questions as you go. But here's the key to really work. It has to fit the task you're trying to learn.
So it's strategic, there's a reason behind it. What else makes it learner-generated drawing?
It has to be representative, too. What that means is your drawing should actually look like, or at least resemble, the thing you're learning about. This is important because it rules out things like flowcharts or diagrams. Those have a different purpose. Maps are kind of in between, they point out. They do have some representational aspects to them, like imagine you're learning about the water cycle. A representative drawing would show you clouds, rain, rivers, evaporation, the whole process visually. But a diagram might just use boxes and arrows.
Got it, that makes sense. So if I'm learning about the heart, my drawing should look like an actual heart with all the chambers and vessels and such, not just some random shapes, right?
You got it. The third thing is that it's constructive. When you're drawing to learn, you're using your visual brain, and you have to connect that to the other ways you're taking in the information, mostly through words, like reading or listening.
So I'm building a picture in my mind and linking it to the words.
Exactly. And maybe the most important part is that it's learner-generated, meaning you're the one making the drawing. It's your hand, your decisions about what to include and how it should look. This is different from just labeling a diagram someone else made or using a computer program to do the work for you.
Okay, I think I have a much better idea of what learner-generated drawing really means now. Let's go back to that promise and practice idea. Why are people so excited about drawing for learning if the research isn't always that clear?
It's actually pretty amazing how much advice is out there for teachers. It seems like everyone's saying drawing is great for all sorts of things in education. They say it helps students observe better, understand new ideas, improve their reading, even write better. Some even say it makes learning more fun.
That's a pretty big list of benefits for something as simple as drawing.
It is. But here's where things get interesting. When you look closely at the research, the studies that test these claims, well, they don't always agree with all that enthusiasm. Like we said, the results are often mixed. Sometimes drawing helps, sometimes it doesn't seem to do much, and sometimes it's not as effective as everyone says it should be. We're seeing this mismatch, this enthusiasm bumping up against less than stellar research. And that leads us to the big question, why? Luckily, the research we're looking at offers some good answers. It all starts with the idea that
Okay, let's hear those answers. What's the first hypothesis that explains this?
it's pretty straightforward but really important. Accuracy matters. The better your drawing shows the information, the better you'll do when you're tested on it.
That makes sense, right? If I draw a machine wrong, I probably won't understand how it works either. But is there any actual research that shows this link between how well you draw and how well you learn?
Oh yeah, there's plenty. For example, in 2001, Van Meter found a strong connection between how accurately people drew the central nervous system and how well they could remember information about it. Green did a study in 1989 with kids learning about different types of aliens, and guess what? The kids who drew those aliens accurately did better at classifying them and figuring out how they were related. Even earlier, back in the 70s, Les Gold and his team found that when young kids drew pictures of stories, the more accurate the drawings, the more details they remembered from the story. What this means for you is don't just scribble something down quickly. Take your time, Look at the details, make sure your drawing is accurate, maybe even compare your drawing to the original source and make it even better.
So it's not just about drawing anything, it's about how well you draw it. Just going through the motions without really paying attention won't help you learn.
You got it. When you're using drawing to learn, you got to focus on getting the important parts and the little details right. Accuracy is key to making drawing work for you.
That's a really good point. What's the second hypothesis that helps explain why the research is so inconsistent?
This one is about support. Learners often need help to use drawing well, especially when they're dealing with tough or new material. It's not always as easy as just saying, draw this.
I could see that. If I was trying to draw something complicated like how cells breathe, I'd probably be lost without some guidance. What kind of support does the research say is best?
There are a few types of support that can make a big difference. Les Gold's research showed that when young kids had a lot of distractions around while they were drawing, it didn't help them remember things better. But when those distractions were gone and the important parts were clear, drawing did improve their memory. That's one kind of support, focusing your attention on what really matters.
So it's like you're giving them a clearer target for their drawing.
Exactly. Van Meter's study on the central nervous system from 2001 shows this even more. They found that students who had more support, things like illustrations to look at and questions that made them compare their drawings to those illustrations, ended up making more accurate drawings. A&D remembering the information better.
So having something to look at and being told to compare my drawing to it really helps.
Right. Other types of support are things like pointing out the key parts of the material and how they're connected. And get this, when they had students talk out loud while they drew, it showed that drawing itself made them think about whether they understood things or not. But the support helped them fix any mistakes they noticed.
That's interesting. So if I've ever felt like drawing wasn't helping me learn something difficult, maybe it wasn't the drawing that was the problem, but that I didn't have enough help or resources to focus on the right things and draw them correctly. Looking for examples or comparing my drawing to something reliable could be a game changer.
For sure, having that extra help, especially with tougher subjects, seems to be really important for making learner-generated drawing work its magic.
Makes sense. Now, what's the last hypothesis that explains when drawing is most effective?
This one has to do with what kind of learning we're talking about and how we measure it. The research shows that drawing is most helpful when we're testing things that go beyond just remembering facts. Things like problem solving, using what you've learned in different situations, and showing a deep understanding of the material.
So not just what are the three parts of a lever,
Yeah.
but more like if you had to move this heavy thing, how would you use a lever to do it?
Exactly. Remember that Van Meter study from 2001? They found that drawing with support was especially helpful for tasks where you had to remember things without any hints. This shows a broader understanding, but not necessarily for just recognizing isolated facts. Another study had people learn about bird wings and then apply that knowledge to a slightly different wing structure. The groups who used drawing with support were much better at problem solving with this new wing, but not at remembering specific facts about bird wings. On the flip side, some studies that focused on just remembering facts might have shown that drawing wasn't as helpful as other strategies, like writing things down. For example, Snowman and Cunningham in 1975 found that writing was better for remembering facts, while Alessandrini in 1981 found that drawing was better for tests that had more challenging questions.
That's really interesting. So it seems like drawing helps me build a more adaptable understanding that I can actually use to think things through and solve problems, not just store random bits of information.
That's the main point. And this fits perfectly with your goal of having those aha moments and really understanding things, because that deeper level of understanding is what leads to those insights.
This is all so insightful. Now, the article goes into the why behind all of this with something called the generative theory of drawing construction. What exactly is that?
This is where it gets really exciting, because this theory, which is based on Mayer's work on how we learn from textbooks, helps us understand what's going on in our brains when we use drawing to learn. It basically boils down to three main steps: selection, organization, and integration.
Okay, let's break those down. Selection first.
Right. Selection is about figuring out what's most important from what you're trying to learn. In this case, it's mostly from the words you're reading or hearing. Now think about the difference between studying a text that already has pictures and one where you have to draw your own. When there are pictures, you're picking out key things from both the words and the pictures. But when you're making your own drawings, you're only using the words and what you already know to decide what to draw.
So if there's no picture already there, I have to really think about what's important enough to include in my drawing, based on what I understand from the text.
Exactly. Next comes organization. Here, you're taking the ideas you formed in your head from the words and using that to organize your visual representation, what some researchers call imagens. This is where your existing knowledge comes in, because you're using what you already know and understand to build these visual pictures from the words.
Hmm.
This can be tricky when you're learning about things that are totally new or hard to picture.
So I'm not just picking out random things, I'm figuring out how they fit together and arranging them in my drawing to show how they're connected in the text.
You got it. And finally, we have integration. This is the big one where you connect those verbal and nonverbal representations in your head. The theory says that drawing actually makes you do this in a way that just looking at a picture wouldn't. You're actively matching the words to the visuals.
So by actually creating the drawing, my brain has to make stronger connections between the picture and the words. It's much more active than just passively looking at an image.
That's the core idea. And this all ties back to those hypotheses we talked about. Support, like having example pictures or questions to guide you, helps you choose the right things and organize them accurately. How accurate your drawing is shows how well you've connected everything in your mind. And the reason drawing helps with those higher-level tasks is probably because this deeper connection creates a stronger understanding that you can use to solve problems and apply what you've learned in different situations.
This generative theory of drawing construction really explains why drawing can be such a powerful tool for learning when used right. It's not magic or anything, it's about how our brains work, selecting, organizing, and integrating information.
Absolutely. And this leads us to the last part of the article, which is about drawing as a skill you can learn and what that means for learning in general.
Okay, so we've defined learner-generated drawing, looked at the research, and explored the brain stuff. How can we actually use this knowledge to learn better?
Well, Van Meter and Garner make a point of saying that drawing, just like other good learning strategies like summarizing or testing yourself, isn't something you're born with. You can learn how to do it better, and the more you practice, the better you get. But they also point out something interesting. There isn't much research specifically on teaching drawing as a learning strategy.
That's surprising, especially considering all the potential benefits we've been talking about.
It is. They compare it to research on other learning tools, like asking yourself questions while you read, or using special note-taking methods. This research shows that having guidance and support is important, and that it can really affect how well learners can judge their own understanding.
So just like you might need to be taught how to use questioning or special note-taking effectively, the same goes for drawing as a learning tool.
Exactly. And they agree with Rothkopf, who said that just adding drawing to something you're learning without a clear purpose or strategy won't automatically make you learn better. It needs to be done thoughtfully and with intention.
So what are some areas for future research? What would research on teaching drawing as a learning strategy look like?
The authors suggest that future research could look into how to teach the steps of drawing for learning, figure out when it's most helpful, and come up with ways to practice and get feedback to improve drawing skills specifically for learning. Imagine actually teaching students how to pick out the most important information to draw, how to arrange it visually in a way that makes sense, and how to check if their drawings are accurate.
That sounds really promising. It would make drawing less of a random or passive activity and more of an active and strategic tool for learners.
Exactly. And for you, as someone who's always looking for better ways to learn and understand new things, this means that seeing drawing as a skill you can develop could be really valuable. Playing around with different levels of support, focusing on making accurate drawings, and using drawing strategically for tasks that need deeper understanding could help you unlock its full potential.
This has been a really fascinating deep dive into learner-generated drawing. So for you, our listener, here's the takeaway. Learner-generated drawing is more than just doodling. It's a strategic process that can really boost your learning, especially when you want to understand things deeply and be able to use what you've learned. But it's not a magic bullet. How well it works depends on how accurate your drawings are, and it often needs the right kind of support and guidance.
What's so cool is that when you take verbal information and turn it into a visual, it makes your brain work hard to process and understand that information in a way that more passive learning methods often don't. This active engagement and that extra effort to connect things are what make drawing such a powerful learning tool.
Here's something to think about. Now that you know more about the power and the details of learner-generated drawing, how could you start using it in your own learning to really understand things better and remember them longer? What kind of support do you think would help you the most?
We encourage you to think back to times when you used drawing to learn, and maybe even try it out with something you're interested in right now. You might find it helpful to go back to that Van Meter and Garner article, or look into other research on visual learning strategies to learn even more. There's definitely a lot of potential here to improve your learning.